getting started with JSON Web Token. So who knows what a JSON Web Token is? What are some ideas?
If you know what cookies are, here's a little bit of it.
Yeah.
JSON Web Token is a one-way generated token, like a string, and you cannot regenerate it. You can verify it, but you cannot regenerate it. So which allows you to sign in once, and then the client, as an application, client receives that token and keeps that in the cookies. So every time you will go to the website, let's say Gmail, you don't have to present your password, but you just show that a token to the user, to the server. And the server knows that it's used. There's nobody else that can have that token, because if you change one character, the whole token is messed up. So it has to be exactly the same.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's I forget what they call it, cryptographically.
It has information about user. It also has information expiration date.
Yep.
So you can specify like expiring today or expiring 2 weeks or 2 years.
You got it. That's there we go. We're done.
We're done.
Yeah. We're done with anything else.
Is it a big file? Must be a lot of characters.
We made it.
It's
Perfect timing.
I'm gonna check on pizza, you can have my check.
Oh,
Go ahead.
this one too.
All right.
Nice.
So quick agenda. Just going to talk about what is a JSON Web Token, what does it look like, the Web Token structure, why is it secure, what are the benefits, and how do you use one? So, what is a JSON Web Token? The technical definition is a self-contained way to securely transmit information between parties as a JSON object. The JSON Web Tokens can be signed using a secret key with the HMAC algorithm, which is hash-based message authentication code. We're not going to go into the algorithms. Don't have enough time for this one. And then they also, so this is going to be kind of a piece here. They can be signed using a public-private key pair, but that is generally a much more niche way to utilize them, because the JSON Web Tokens themselves are not secure. If you have a JSON Web Token, anyone can see what's in it for the most part. You can, however, like if you are sending things between like back-end services where there is public-private key pairs, you can encrypt them, but generally they are only hashed and they are reversible, which we'll look at here in a second. So what does a JSON Web Token look like? This is a JSON Web Token. It's a dot-separated base 64 encoded string. So I've got some links here so we can pull up. If you want, there's a ton of information on this jwt.io. It's set up by Auth0. But this is the basic JSON Web Token. This is what one looks like in the browser. This is what's going to be sent. When it's decoded, you're going to have a header, a payload, and then a signature. So we'll go into a little bit more what these are here, but the header is basically like what algorithm and what the type. And then there's some more information here. And down here, you can actually, with jwt.io, kind of verify a signature on a token. So you can see this signature is verified, and if I can go over here and I can change it. I can start typing in other things, so you can see how the token is changing as I type it. And then I don't have in this one an expiration, but you can set the expiration. Once you pass that, it'll basically stop verifying the signature. Yeah. All right. So yeah, JWT.io, and I'll share these slides out later. You can take a look at it. But there's a lot of good information there, and you can play around with them. Which we're going to use it later, and I'll show you how JSON Web Tokens are not secure, because we're going to grab a random one and just look at what's in it. All right. So that structure we talked about a little bit. You saw on the previous slide there. You've got the header, the payload, and the signature. The header is the type of token it is, because there's like JWT, there's like JWS, which is like JSON Web Signature, there's JSON Web Encrypted. There's a few different versions, but they're all referred to as just JWTs. And so the JWT is primarily what's going to be used. The payload, so a lot of people think that JSON Web Tokens, because they're JSON, is just a JSON object you can kind of do whatever you want with and send data back and forth. That is not what you want to use them for. They are the data inside that payload, they call them claims, and that's basically what that the ISS is like, the issued You can have name, there's expiration, and they're all going to be 3 characters. And on the jwt.io, there's a link that if you kind of go down in their like getting started guide, that has basically a list of all the claims that are available. And that's how the JSON Web Tokens are basically kind of authenticated with the client and the server, or with the server. And so you're going to have a few different types of claims. There's registered, public, and private. The registered are basically the claims that come pre-set up with any JSON Web Token or any library for the language that you're going to use. A lot of things, that's like the subject, the issuer, the expiration, the issued time. You can have a few others like the group. Public claims, these are claims that you can assign yourself. So like you can have your own pieces of data in there if you want to. But they recommend if you are doing it, make sure you do some reading, because if you basically set something up that's going to collide with one of the registered claims, you're going to break your JSON Web Token. So you have to do a little reading. And then private ones, these are, when it comes down to like the encrypted token, where you're sending between 2 entities that have a public-private key pair. Those are going to be basically private claims that you're only going to access if you can decrypt it. And then the signature, that's just the encoded header. The encoded payload, which is why it's dot separated. You've got header, payload, and then the signature down at the bottom. And that's, switch back to the browser so you can see. So you've got the red part here, that's the header. The purple part, that's your payload. Blue part here, that is your signature. So pretty easy to kind of see what it is, and you can take, and we'll do it here in a minute, but you can take any JSON Web Token and you can drop it in here and it'll decode it. As long as you put in the right algorithm and everything. So that here in a bit. And again, like the private one, that's like if you have like 2 backend entities that have public-private key pairs, because if you were to like try and send an encrypted JSON Web Token to a client, you would have to have that private key somewhere in the front end code, which would defeat the purpose, because then anyone could just decrypt it. You're not keeping anything secure. That make sense? Any questions on that?
I'm not clear what a claim is.
So that's it's kind of a weird one, because they call them claims. This right here where it says sub, this is a claim. Name would be a claim, and then the IAT is issued at time.
Okay.
These are the claims. So it's the key is the claim.
Okay. I claim that this is true.
Yes.
Sub is usually for a user ID, but they use sub for some reason.
Yep.
It's subject, right?
Yeah, I think I can pull it up to you.
Actually, sometimes you can use like role. Like my role is an admin or user. That actually makes sense, because that's really a claim. The
Right.
rest is just given. But yeah, those are claims.
Yep. Because there's claims, and then I'm not going to get into it here, but in the back end, there's like, it's claims, and then assertions are the piece in the back end that like validates. And we'll look at a little bit of code, but I didn't build like a full example, because to build a demo for JSON, you basically need to build a full stack app that has user authentication and login. So I just stole what somebody else had made, because that's much easier. All right. So why are they secure? We touched a little bit on this here, because the answer might surprise you. That's the biggest, I think, misconception with JSON Web Tokens, is that the token itself is secure and the information in it is encrypted, which that is not the case. It is simply used to basically verify who you are. So they can be encrypted, like we talked about. You can have basically party-to-party transmission where they're encrypted, but that's the same as just encrypting anything and sending it back and forth. You don't need a JSON Web Token for that. But the signed tokens can verify the integrity, and that's kind of what you were saying earlier, is that you're basically saying that this token is good. You can verify it, it's not been changed, so you know that whoever has that token is who they say they are. And that's the big piece that makes them good for authentication and transmitting secure information, is that you're not using the token to transmit the secure information, but whoever has the token, you know that they are who they say they are. And you can say, like, if you have a token for user ID 1, and you send that to the server, server, oh, this is a valid token, I can send back the information for user ID 1. Because the only way that, in theory, someone could, take your token and get your information would be to get onto your computer, get your JSON web token out of your browser, in which case you have much bigger issues. So when the tokens are signed using those public-private key pairs, that signature certifies that the only party holding the private key is the one that signed it. So basically, when you have a JSON web token, the server will generate it out, send it to the client, and that's where like the issued at time, and like you're talking about the expiration time, is that token becomes invalid after that expiration time. So if someone gets a hold of your old token and tries to send it to the server goes, that's not valid. Or if someone tries to say, they get your JSON web token and try and say, ooh, give me the stuff for user ID 10 instead of user ID 1. They've modified that. It's no longer basically the same token. Server says, nope, you're not who you say you are.
This is why when you're on Asana, for instance, every 2 weeks it keeps asking you to enter your password again. And that's the reason it generates another token, basically.
Most tokens are only kept for either a day or 2 days or like a week for the most. Because if you have one that's forever, then that's not good. That's not secure. Cool.
So is this basically a cookie to your browser?
Kind of, but it's not, you don't have to use them as a cookie. You could store it in a cookie, but you can also store it just in your browser's storage. So you don't actually have to save a cookie. And I'll go into a little bit more like what you can use that for.
When you say it's like a cookie is more generic.
Mhm.
JW token is very specific.
Yeah, I guess I'm
inside the
asking,
cookie.
does your browser know anything about it, or does it?
Your browser knows that it's a piece of data
Yeah.
that it's assigned, that is given that you can store somewhere. You wouldn't necessarily store it as a cookie, and you don't necessarily want to store them in local storage on your browser because other websites can access local storage, but you can put it, I forget what it's called, but you can have, it's like a website specific storage in your browser that like only your URL can access. And your browser basically goes, oh, I know what this is, because it's, instead of having to send a bunch of data, the JSON web token is just another thing that goes into the header in your HTTP request. Because they're so small, they just get sent back and forth with every request. And I'll show you where one's stored here in a second so you can kind of see.
So is everyone just switching away from cookies then for this other state storage because everyone knows how to, wipe the cookie cache now?
Yeah, so it lets you do that. There's a few advantages to this too that I'll go into as well, but yes, not having cookies is one of them. Because you also, with JSON Web Tokens, it's stateless. You don't have to have like a session on the server or anything.
So how do you clear this new cookie space?
So it's not really anything that you need to clear, because if a website uses one, it's going to get replaced anytime you authenticate. So you're not filling up your browser with all sorts of like tracking cookies and stuff like that. It's basically like one single token that when this one goes bad, it'll just get replaced.
Just for identification.
Yep. So think of it as, instead of like, and I'll talk more about it in a second, but that's my last line there. Think of it as an ID badge that allows the user into a secure facility. Is that token is an ID badge. So you get a new one every once in a while, but you don't have like a whole stack of ID badges somewhere. You get rid of the old one, get the new one. So yeah, kind of jumping away from like, why are they secure? What does all that mean? Basically, it's just that the simple answer is that you use the JSON web token alongside a normal request. The JSON web token goes into the header of the HTTP request. They're not, like we talked about, they're not for securing information or protecting private information. Dinner. Sit that down.
Yeah.
We'll finish this slide and I'll give everybody a second to grab a bunch of pizza. And then so the tokens allow the server to recognize the client based on what the token is. And they're secure because the server can detect if that token has been modified and decline that request for secure information. Just like the ID badge. If you go in and you've got your ID badge, they're going to let you in. If you go in and you've got a faked ID badge which got a different person's picture and a wrong name, they're going to send you back. So, any questions? Grab pizza.
Is there a standard for the header key?
Yeah, I think it's called bearer. is what it's called.
Bearer?
Bearer, I think is the one.
So then where are browser fingerprints stored? They're just regular cookies?
Like a fingerprint, define fingerprint in that situation.
Yeah, I've just heard it's becoming more common. Well, it's like, if you're using Brave browser, their ED browser, which is just grabbing all the metadata.
Yep.
There's enough metadata now where it's just almost impossible for you to not be unique unless you're trying to be unique.
Yep.
Just based on your data footprint. So I guess the fingerprint is just the record of
It's a lot of stuff. It's like operating system, screen resolution. There's a lot of things that go into that. I mean, with this here, I guess.
So if you snapshot what somebody looks like when they come,
Yeah.
then that saving that snapshot can be used as a, I don't know if you want to use it for like authentication, but we're using it for tracking.
Yeah, you can definitely use it for tracking, but even then, unless you have like a really, really good fingerprinting library, you can't get too unique. And then as far as this goes, if another site is trying to fingerprint, I mean, they can't. If you're setting up the web token properly, it's going into that website-specific storage. So another site couldn't see your token and try and use it. But even then, your tokens are always going to be changing, so you couldn't really use one to fingerprint somebody. But yeah, fingerprinting is wild. I didn't know much about it, but scary stuff. All right, any other questions about this one? That was a good one. Does that kind of make sense?
How does my browser know to attach the cookie that, or sorry, the JWT that you gave me to the request every time I hit your site?
It's going to be built into your front end code to use it.
Okay.
So it's basically the same thing when you're setting it up. It'll be a header item. Like you said, I think it's generally put under bearer, and that's where the token will go. And basically every request will happen. So every time you send a request, the server is always checking. That's bringing in the next where it's stateless. There's no session on the server. The server, you don't have to have some session on a specific box or anything. So what are the benefits? That's cool. So one thing is that just using JSON is less verbose, so it's smaller, it's easier to transmit. If you look at has you ever seen like a SAML security token? Think of that JSON web token times like 50. Like it's a massive piece of data. So it's a lot bigger, it's more robust, it's hard to kind of simply transmit back and forth. So the JSON web token is just a lot easier. And then of course, JSON parsers are common in all modern languages because they can be mapped directly to objects. You don't have to worry about like XML or some other kind of markup being decoded. JSON objects is just the key value object storage. It's a lot easier to map out and get the data out of. And then that's the big one. It doesn't use cookies. You don't have to store it in a cookie. So you don't have to use cookies. You don't have to have your little, site where it's like, here's all the cookies we use. You say, we don't use cookies. Don't need them. And so that's the cool part is JSON web tokens, they remove the need for server sessions. Why is that cool? What's the benefit of not having a server session? It's kind of half a trick question. With everything being microservices and different things like that now, if you have a session, say you have a load balancer and users on server 1, and then they get load balanced to server 2 has no idea what that session is, so now they have to re-authenticate. Whereas with the JSON web token, it's just verifying the signature. You could go to 100 different servers, as long as it's a good token, and it, basically it matches the user, then you can do it. So you can have all sorts of, that's what they use for at least a lot of applications nowadays to sign into on your computer will have one, mobile devices, Android phones, iPhones. You can basically give all of these different devices a web token and they can access your API or what have you. And if you have multiple, API to data sources, if you have different websites all coming back to a similar database, it doesn't matter. There's no cross-origin resource sharing issues. If anyone's worked with JavaScript, you've gotten some sort of CORS error. You don't have to worry about that because this you can basically your authentication, your ID badge just goes with your request. As long as the server can validate that, then it says you're good. So you can have different URLs, you can have different APIs. As long as the authentication is going through some sort of one of your servers, you're good to go.
That's actually why they made this in the first place.
To get rid of the core stuff.
Yeah, to get rid of that session requirements,
Mhm.
especially when people move to start using mobile phones.
Mhm.
Those are requirements that they actually, that's the reason why they came up with this.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good history.
If you look at the
Because they didn't want to have the mobile phones to always have those sessions and.
Yeah, because you have mobile phones, then yeah, you can do like website, but there are also apps.
Yep.
There's no session in the app.
Yeah, how do you-
do that? But it's easy to keep that data in the app.
Yep. And then once it expires, you just say, I gotta log in again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This is timely because I've been, with our end of sprint, and this entire sprint, been working on building up a new endpoint, new microservice.
Yeah.
And it was a pain in the rear getting the authorized to work. And we have a home built key generator, a token generator. And it was putting in for the bearer, and it's a generated token string, and to test it through SOAP UI. So
I've never had to use.
yeah, or I could use Postgres, but
Mhm.
SOAP UI, I've already got a library or something there. But you're mentioning bearer, I'm like, yep, been using it all day today.
Yep. Setting the token in. Yeah, and so that's just the cool thing is that it's stateless, so mobile phones, computers, what have you. If it's just a client that needs to talk to your server, you can use JSON Web Token. So, any questions on that stuff? Not too bad, kind of makes sense. All right. So how do I use JSON Web Tokens? This is the more coding part of the whole thing. So we're going to talk about, we're going to check one out. We're going to look at some of the libraries, and we're going to look at some code examples because Auth0 has some really, really good repositories in GitHub that show you some JSON Web Token examples, and it's better than anything I could do on my own. So